In the quaint, peaceful town of Ashland, Oregon, life often moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. Nestled in the southern part of the state, this small town was known for its annual Shakespeare Festival, tight-knit neighborhoods, and the kind of calm that made headlines for lost cats and charity bake sales. The community prided itself on being safe and wholesome, a haven for families, retirees, and artists alike. It was a place where people knew each other by name, where children rode their bikes to school without fear, and where the police were more familiar with noise complaints than emergency calls. Life in Ashland followed a rhythm of trust and harmony, built upon years of shared smiles, borrowed sugar, and weekend garage sales. Nothing truly dark or sinister was ever expected to happen there. That was until a chilling truth emerged from the mouth of an innocent child, shaking the town to its core and dismantling its image of safety. The story began with a 7-year-old girl named Lily, a quiet, introspective child with large, searching eyes and a soft voice that rarely demanded attention. She wasn't the type to misbehave or cause disruptions in class. In fact, she was often praised for her attentiveness, her empathy toward classmates, and a wisdom that seemed to surpass her age. But one morning, during a routine conversation with her teacher, Lily looked up with calm certainty and said, "Daddy's not dead. He's under the floor." Her teacher, Ms. Bennett, blinked, unsure if she'd heard her correctly. The words were so unusual, so casually spoken, that they hung in the air like a fog. Lily's face showed no signs of distress, no fear, no sadness, just quiet conviction, like someone stating a simple fact. It wasn't a plea for attention, it was a child's clarity in a world that wasn't listening. Initially, the adults around her dismissed the statement as a product of grief or misunderstanding. They knew her father, Michael, had been reported missing by her mother, Jessica, 2 months earlier. Jessica had explained to everyone that Michael had left after a heated argument and hadn't returned. She told friends, neighbors, and even the school that Michael had simply walked away. Not out of anger, but from exhaustion, from the daily grind, from the unrelenting pressures of adulthood. No foul play was suspected. People assumed he had walked away from his family, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressures of marriage, fatherhood, or finances. These things happened, unfortunately. But Lily's words didn't match the narrative, and they lingered in her teacher's mind like a splinter lodged too deep to ignore. Ms. Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. In her 2 decades as an educator, she had learned to listen closely, not just to what children said, but to how they said it. And Lily's calm delivery wasn't the voice of a child lost in fantasy. It was the voice of a child who knew something real, something unshakable. Reluctant to ignore her instincts, Ms. Bennett reported Lily's statement to the local police, emphasizing that while it might be nothing, she felt it warranted at least a basic welfare check. The officers, though initially skeptical, agreed to follow up. They had learned that even the smallest clue, no matter how bizarre, could lead to the truth, and in this case, it would lead them into the darkness beneath the surface, literally. Later that day, 2 officers, Officer Raymond Clark, a seasoned but kind-hearted veteran of the force, and Detective Elena Ruiz, a sharp and observant investigator with a knack for reading people, arrived at the modest home on the edge of Ashland. The house, white with blue shutters and a slightly overgrown lawn, looked perfectly ordinary, the kind of place that gave no hint of secrets. Jessica opened the door with a warm smile, dressed neatly in jeans and a sweater. She appeared relaxed, even friendly. "Of course, come in," she said, when the officers explained the purpose of their visit. "I understand this must be confusing." Her tone was measured, her demeanor cooperative. She reiterated the story she had told before. Her husband, Michael, had left in early August after they had argued about finances. He had packed a few things, said he needed space, and walked out. She hadn't heard from him since. "It's been hard on Lily. she added, shaking her head sadly. "But I guess she just can't accept that he's really gone." Her words sounded rehearsed, practiced even, but there was just enough sadness in her voice to make the lie believable. As the officers looked around, everything appeared in order. The kitchen was clean, the living room tidy. Lily's drawings decorated the fridge. It was a picture-perfect home on the surface. There were no signs of violence, no overturned furniture, no blood. But something about the house felt off. A strange stillness, a sense of something hidden just beneath the surface. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, the absence of sound that screamed too loudly. As they moved through the home, Detective Ruiz paused in the storage room, located near the back of the house. It was cramped, filled with cleaning supplies and cardboard boxes. But one of the floorboards caught her attention. It didn't quite match the others, and when she stepped on it, it moved ever so slightly, almost like it was floating above something it wasn't meant to cover. With Jessica growing noticeably anxious, the officers decided to investigate further. They pried open the loose board and discovered a hatch underneath, a hidden entrance to a small, dark compartment that had no windows, no ventilation, and barely enough room to lie down. The stench that rose up from the hole was foul and damp, a mixture of mildew, rotting food, and something unwashed. The air was thick with despair, and then they saw him. Curled on the cold concrete floor, trembling and emaciated, was Michael. His wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape. His clothes were torn and dirty, and his face was hollow from dehydration and starvation. His skin was pale, his lips cracked, and his body shivered uncontrollably. For a moment he seemed confused, blinking against the sudden brightness like a man who hadn't seen daylight in years. But as soon as he saw the uniforms, he whispered hoarsely, "Help me, please." The officers acted immediately. An ambulance was called, and paramedics arrived to provide urgent care. Michael was conscious, but barely. His body was weak, but his mind was intact. When asked what had happened, he gave a single name: Jessica. The woman who stood so calmly before them moments earlier was now revealed as a captor, a monster hiding behind the mask of normalcy. As the truth unfolded, the horror deepened. Jessica had drugged Michael with sleeping pills dissolved into his wine one evening, after dinner. Once he had passed out, she had tied him up with belts and dragged his unconscious body into the small compartment she had prepared over weeks. She had constructed it herself, using leftover materials, sealing the space so no one would notice. For 2 months, she had fed him just enough to keep him alive, but never enough to allow him to fight back or call for help. She continued her daily routine, smiling at neighbors, attending school events, and telling everyone that her husband had simply walked out. She played the role of the abandoned wife, even as the man she claimed was gone lay beneath her feet, suffering in silence. But Lily had known. Somehow the child had sensed the truth. She had heard faint thumps beneath the floor late at night. She had noticed her mother disappearing for long periods, returning with food that never appeared on the dinner table. She had seen the way her mother avoided certain rooms, locked doors that were never locked before. She had tried to ask questions, but was always silenced. Eventually, she decided to tell the only adult she trusted, her teacher. The town was stunned. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Television crews, journalists, and curious residents crowded outside the modest home. Jessica was arrested on multiple charges: attempted murder, kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. During interrogation, she offered little explanation beyond a twisted justification. "He was going to leave me. I couldn't let him abandon us." The chilling simplicity of her words sent a collective shiver through everyone who heard them. Michael spent weeks in the hospital recovering, both physically and emotionally. His reunion with Lily was deeply emotional. When he saw her for the first time since his rescue, he wept openly, pulling her into his arms. "You saved me," he told her, tears streaming down his face. "You never gave up on me." The bond between them, once tested by tragedy, was now stronger than ever. Lily, ever calm, simply replied, "I knew you were still here. I just had to find someone who'd listen." Her words, simple and pure, carried the weight of 1,000 truths. The people of Ashland were shaken. How had this happened right under their noses? How could such darkness exist within someone who appeared so normal? Jessica had hosted barbecues, volunteered at Lily's school, and attended church. No one suspected a thing. But evil, they realized, does not always wear a villain's face. Sometimes it smiles at you from across the picket fence. Lily became a symbol of bravery. Her story was shared across the country. News anchors called her a hero. Her classmates looked at her with awe. Psychologists wrote articles about her intuition and emotional strength. But for Lily, the recognition didn't matter. What mattered was that her father was safe, that her belief in him had been right. Sometimes the truth comes from the quietest voice in the room. Children see more than we think. They feel more than we give them credit for. Lily's unwavering trust in her instincts saved a life. In a world that often overlooks or dismisses the words of the young, her courage reminds us that even the smallest voice can uncover the biggest truths. And sometimes it takes a child to see what all the adults have missed. Because the real heroes aren't always the ones in uniform. Sometimes they're the ones with crayons in their backpacks and bravery in their hearts. Lily's story teaches us that when someone tells us something that doesn't quite make sense, something too bizarre, too impossible, we owe it to them to listen. Because behind those words might be a cry for help. Behind that whisper might be someone trapped beneath the floor, waiting to be found.